So, think about the most persuasive person you know. Like, really picture them.
Yeah, that person who always just seems to command the room.
Right. The one who gets their ideas across and gets everyone on board with, seemingly zero friction. Well, chances are they actually speak about 50% less than you do.
Which is crazy to think about.
It totally is, because we have this culturally ingrained idea that influence belongs to the loudest person in the room, like the slick negotiator.
Right. The person who always has that perfect airtight counterargument to just back someone into a corner until they basically have to say yes.
Exactly. We picture influence as this very aggressive, almost combative sport, like a Jedi mind trick or something.
Yeah, where you outmaneuver the other person. You just overwhelm their defenses with logic and data until they surrender.
So today we are getting into a brilliant issue of the Breakthrough Bulletin. It's written by Coach Renee, and the focus is specifically on influence and persuasion.
And we're completely dismantling that old school high-pressure model today.
We really are, because Coach Renee's framework argues that influence is not a tactic for control. It's actually a skill of connection. And that's a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. And to understand why you listening to this right now, why you should care about this shift, you have to look at what happens when you rely on control.
Right. What actually happens in the brain.
Exactly. And there's a psychological concept called reactance. Basically, when a human being feels like their freedom to choose is being threatened, their brain perceives that as a literal threat.
Like when they're being pressured or manipulated?
Yes, or backed into a corner.
Yeah.
They will push back against you, even if your idea is objectively good, just to preserve their own autonomy.
Wow. So all that energy you spend trying to force a yes is like actually creating the exact resistance you're fighting against?
Precisely. Whether you are, trying to get buy-in for a massive new project at work, or you're just trying to negotiate weekend plans with your family.
Right. It applies everywhere.
It does. If the other person feels manipulated, the trust just evaporates. There's actually a quote in the bulletin from Stephen R. Covey that really anchors this.
Oh, I love Covey. What's the quote?
He says, "True influence isn't about control, it's about connection." Real influence means moving people towards something good because they actually trust you, not because you just wore them down.
Okay, I love the philosophy of connection over control. It sounds incredibly healthy, but let's look at how this actually functions in the real world.
Let's do it.
Because the first major shift Coach Renee outlines for building that connection is moving away from raw data and choosing to, quote unquote, tell the story.
Right.
But I have to push back on this right out of the gate.
Go for it.
If I am walking into a Q3 earnings review, or I'm pitching a very skeptical client who is like staring at the clock, they do not want a campfire story.
Yeah, they want the numbers.
Exactly. My CFO does not want a narrative arc. They want the hard facts, the ROI, and the data. So doesn't telling a story in a fast-paced environment feel like you're just wasting everyone's time?
It definitely feels that way because we fundamentally misunderstand how the brain processes information.
Okay, how so?
Well, when you just list facts and data points, you are only activating the language processing centers of the listener's brain. They are decoding your words into meaning, but they aren't feeling anything. It requires a lot of cognitive effort for them to actually care.
Oh, I see.
The bulletin addresses this beautifully. It says, facts inform, but stories transform.
Wait, transform how? What is actually happening neurologically when you tell a story?
So when you tell a story, even a very brief one, it activates the listener's sensory cortex, their motor cortex, and the insula. And the insula is tied to empathy.
Oh, wow. So their whole brain lights up.
Exactly. It creates this phenomenon called neural coupling. The listener's brain waves actually begin to synchronize with yours.
That is wild.
They experience the narrative as if they are living it. So if you want someone to remember your ROI data, you get to hand them the data. It'll just bounce off. You have to put the data inside a story.
So the story is essentially a Trojan horse.
Yes.
You use the narrative to get past the cognitive defenses, and then once you're inside the city walls, then you unload the facts and the statistics.
That is a perfect analogy. The story makes the statistics actually matter.
Yeah.
And Coach Renee provides a very actionable micro step to build this habit without taking up a ton of time in a meeting.
Because no one has time for a 10-minute monologue.
Exactly. You just need 3 sentences.
Yeah.
Take whatever idea you are pitching this week and structure it as a moment, a challenge, and an outcome.
Okay, let's actually test this. Let's say my objective fact is, our new onboarding software reduces training time by 30%.
Okay.
If I just say that it's super dry, it's literally just a number.
Right. It informs, but it doesn't connect. So put it through the three-sentence framework.
Okay, moment, challenge, outcome. How about 6 months ago, I watched our newest hire, David, spend his entire first week buried in PDF manuals, looking completely overwhelmed.
Nice. That's the moment and the challenge.
Right. And then, for the outcome, we implemented the new interactive software, and now new hires like David are actively contributing to client projects by day 3.
Okay. Notice what happened there. You still delivered the data, the reduction in training time, but now I have this mental image of a stressed out employee named David.
Poor David.
Right. I can empathize with that frustration. You didn't just give me a metric. You gave me a solution to human suffering. That is real influence.
But let's look at the flip side of this. Let's say I deliver my perfect 3-sentence Trojan horse story, I land the outcome, and the other person immediately pushes back.
As they often do.
Yeah, they poke a hole in my idea, or they raise this massive objection. The natural instinct, and I am absolutely guilty of this, is to immediately reload and fire back with more facts to defend my position.
Sure, that's human nature. But the bulletin highlights a paradox here.
The paradox of persuasion, right?
Yes. The instinct is that influence is about what we say. But Coach Renee argues that real influence actually begins when our mouths are completely closed. The principle is listen to connect.
Which, I mean, that sounds really nice on a greeting card, but when my idea is under attack, listening just feels like losing.
I get that. But think about influence like a tuning fork.
Okay.
If you strike a tuning fork, another fork nearby will only vibrate and hum if it is calibrated to the exact same frequency.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. If it's not, your sound is just noise to them. Listening is how you calibrate to the other person's frequency. When someone pushes back, their amygdala, the threat detection center of the brain, is totally flared up.
So they're in a defensive posture.
Exactly. And you cannot logically persuade a defensive brain.
So how do you disarm the amygdala then?
By making them feel completely genuinely heard. Not just politely waiting for your turn to speak, but actively proving that you understand their position.
And that actually changes their brain chemistry.
It does. When a person feels heard, their cortisol levels physically drop, their guard comes down. And that drop in defense is literally the only environment where your influence can actually take root.
Okay, I have to challenge this, though.
Go ahead.
If someone comes at me with an objection that is just objectively wrong or, totally misguided, if I sit there and listen and validate what they are saying, aren't I just agreeing with a bad idea?
That is like the most common fear people have with this.
Doesn't it hurt my position?
No, because there's a massive difference between validating a reality and conceding a fact. You are not saying you are right. You are saying, I see how this looks from your perspective.
Ah, okay.
This is called tactical empathy. And the micro step for this in the source material is incredibly effective. In your next high-stakes conversation, force a pause before you respond. Take one literal breath and then summarize what the other person just said in a single sentence before you add anything of your own.
Okay, so instead of saying, no, that timeline is fine, I would pause and say something like, so what I'm hearing is that you are feeling completely bottlenecked by the Q3 deliverables, and adding this project feels like it's going to break the system. Is that right?
Exactly. You haven't agreed to change the timeline. You haven't conceded anything at all.
But I've proven that I'm in the trench with them.
Yes, you're looking at the same problem.
Yeah.
You calibrated the tuning fork. And once they say, yes, exactly, that's how I feel, the tension just evaporates. Now you are collaborating instead of combating.
It shifts it from me versus you to us versus the problem. I love that.
It's powerful.
Okay, so we've told the story, we've listened, we've summarized, we've calibrated to their frequency, and their guard is down. Now, it is officially our turn to speak. How do we make sure we don't completely blow it? Because this brings up the third pillar in the framework. Speak with purpose.
And this is where we really have to examine our own relationship with silence. Because once the floor is ours and the other person is actually listening, the cognitive load suddenly shifts to us.
Yeah, all the pressure is on.
And what do most of us do when we feel that pressure? We fill the space with noise.
We ramble. Oh my gosh, we use so many filler words. I'll catch myself saying things like, well, I just kind of think that maybe we should possibly look at doing this, if everyone is okay with that.
Yeah, a lot of qualifiers.
It's like I'm apologizing for even having an opinion.
That is called social buffering.
Oh.
We hedge our language because we are afraid of rejection.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. If I pitch an idea firmly and you reject it, That really hurts. But if I pitch it weakly, like maybe we could kind of do this, and you reject it, my ego is protected because I didn't fully commit to it anyway.
But every single one of those filler words dilutes your authority.
Because if you don't sound completely convinced of your own idea, why would anyone else risk their capital on it?
Precisely.
And there's a cognitive cost for the listener, too. If it takes you 50 words to say what could be said in 10, you are exhausting the listener's brain. Clarity fuels action. Your words only carry weight when they are radically intentional.
So how do we actually strip away the buffering and the rambling?
By knowing exactly what your target is before you open your mouth. Coach Renee's micro step here is brilliant for preparing for a tough conversation.
Okay, what's the step?
Before you speak, write down one sentence that answers this specific question. What do I want the other person to feel, think, or do after we talk?
I think breaking it down into feel, think, or do is the real genius part of that, because not every conversation is a pitch for a concrete action.
Exactly.
Sometimes I'm talking to a team member who is just burnt out, and my only goal is for them to feel supported and secure.
And if your goal is for them to feel supported, you won't use language that pressures them to do a new task.
Right.
Your intention dictates your vocabulary.
Right.
Or maybe you need a client to think differently about market trends. Or you need a vendor to do a specific rewrite on a contract.
But what if I sit down to write that sentence and I realize, I actually don't know what I want them to feel, think, or do. Like, I just want to vent, or I just want to sound smart in the meeting.
Then that is your cue to stay silent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you cannot articulate the purpose of your message, you are not ready to deliver it. Speaking without purpose isn't influence, it's just broadcasting.
That is a harsh but very necessary reality check, and it transitions perfectly into the next phase of the bulletin.
Right, taking inventory.
Because it's one thing to understand storytelling, tactical empathy, and intentional speaking on like an intellectual level. It's another thing entirely to look in the mirror and evaluate how we actually operate in our day-to-day lives.
Because influence is not just a hat you put on for the boardroom. It is the operating system for how you navigate the world.
Yeah.
It's how you handle a customer service dispute, how you text your friends, how you get your kids out the door in the morning.
So true. So the source material gives us two reflective questions, basically two mirrors to hold up to our current behavior. Here is the first mirror. Ask yourself, how do you currently influence those around you?
And to get past our own self-deception, there is a great exercise here. List 3 recent interactions where you tried to change someone's mind or behavior.
Okay.
Look closely at those 3 interactions. Were you genuinely inviting the other person into a shared perspective, or were you pushing your point across by force?
Pushing versus inviting. When you really analyze those two words, the physical toll becomes so obvious.
How do you mean?
Well, when you are pushing your point, when you're relying on control, you have to generate all the energy yourself. It is exhausting. You walk away from those interactions feeling completely drained because you had to provide all the forward momentum.
It's the difference between trying to shove a boulder up a hill versus walking alongside someone and showing them a path they actually want to take.
Yes.
Inviting requires less physical energy, but it requires much more self-awareness.
Which brings us to the second mirror, which is about reimagining what is actually possible. The question is, what if you could persuade with authenticity instead of force?
Now, the word authenticity gets thrown around a lot, but in this context, it means influencing in a way that doesn't trigger that reactance, that defensive threat response we talked about earlier.
Right.
And the best way to understand this is through observation. Think of someone in your own life who has positively influenced you without ever making you feel pressured.
I feel like everyone has that person. Maybe a mentor, a favorite professor, or, just a friend who always seems grounded.
Right.
When I think of my person, what strikes me is that their influence didn't feel loud. It felt spacious.
Spacious? Why did it feel spacious? What specific mechanics were they using? The exercise asks you to identify 2 things they did differently.
Okay, let's see.
Did they ask incredibly specific questions? Did they physically lean back instead of leaning in aggressively? Did they allow for silence without rushing to fill it?
For my person, it was definitely the silence. They never interrupted. You could tell they were actually digesting what you said, not just, waiting for their turn to speak. And because they were so calm, I found myself getting calmer.
That's mirror neurons at work. We unconsciously adopt the emotional state of the people we are engaging with.
That makes total sense.
If they model connection and calm, you reflect it back. The goal here is to identify one of those specific qualities and Purposefully adopt it in your own communication this week.
Okay, so we have the theory, we have the self-awareness, but how do we actually bridge the gap between reading about this and executing it when the pressure is on?
That's the hard part.
Right, because when your heart rate spikes in a high-stakes moment, all this theory goes right out the window.
It does, which is why influence has to be viewed as a muscle, not a personality trait. You don't just wake up one day as an influential communicator.
You have to practice.
Exactly. You have to put reps in under low stakes so that the muscle memory is there when the stakes are high.
And Coach Renee has designed the perfect workout for this. It's called the Impact Rehearsal. It is a 5-step process to physically practice a persuasive message before you are in the hot seat.
And it starts with getting out of your own head and focusing entirely on your audience.
Right. So step 1, you choose one specific message you need someone to act on this week. But instead of obsessing over what you want, you map the audience. What do they care about? What are their pressures? What story will resonate with their specific reality?
That is where most pitches die, by the way. We pitch our own priorities instead of theirs.
Totally.
Once you know what they care about, you draft a single opening line. And based on what we learned, this line cannot just be a data dump. It has to lead with story or connection.
You are drafting your Trojan horse.
Exactly. But here's where the actual rehearsal comes in. You have to speak it out loud. And when you do, you aren't just memorizing the words, you are auditing your tone and your pacing.
Tone is everything. I mean, you can have a beautifully written, empathetic sentence, but if you deliver it with a tight, aggressive vocal fry, it completely ruins the effect.
Because the mammalian brain processes vocal prosody, like the pitch, the speed, the tension in your voice, long before the neocortex processes your vocabulary.
Oh.
We scan for threat cues in tone. If your words say, "I want to collaborate," but your tight rush tone says, "I am trying to control you," the listener's brain will believe the tone every single time.
Wow. So they are biologically reacting to your stress, not your logic. That is incredible.
It really is.
So you practice the tone, you slow down, you smooth it out, and then you actually go deliver the message in real life. But the rehearsal process doesn't end when the conversation ends, right?
Right. The most critical part of the rehearsal is the postmortem. After the interaction, take 2 quiet minutes to reflect.
Just to analyze how it went.
Yeah. What landed? Where did their eyes glaze over? Did you start rushing when they pushed back? This reflection is the mechanism that turns raw information into actual behavioral change.
So bringing this all together, what does this entire framework from the Breakthrough Bulletin really mean for us? I think it means we have permission to lay down our weapons.
Beautifully said.
We don't have to be the loudest, we don't have to outsmart anyone, and we don't have to rely on forceful tactics that just exhaust everyone involved. By embracing storytelling, by mastering the paradox of listening, and by speaking with crystal clear purpose, we really reclaim influence as a tool for genuine connection.
We finally stopped pushing the boulder up the hill. And, to leave you with a final thought to really process this week, if true influence is fundamentally about connection and listening, it completely reframes our failures.
How so?
Think about the areas in your life where you feel the least influential, the people you struggle to persuade the most. We usually assume we just need better arguments for them. But what if it's not a communication problem at all? What if, at its core, it is a connection problem? And until you fix the connection, your words will always just be noise.
That completely flips the script on how we approach difficult people. It's not about finding better words, it's about building a better bridge.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us today to unpack all of this. If you found value in this source material and you want to keep exploring ways to elevate how you operate, make sure you subscribe for more opportunities for personal growth, just like this one.
We'd love to have you back.
You can find all the subscribe links right there in the show notes and the caption. Until next time, focus on the connection and the influence will follow.